evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. It's been a while since I've been on your screens. My name is Usihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. Welcome to it. It is 7:30 on a Wednesday evening. Remember, the Big Daddy Liberty Show, we're changing things up a little bit. This show will no longer be weekly, and instead we're going to do the show twice a month. Why? Because the show is going to become a lot more carte blanche-ish in its nature. We do hard-hitting investigative journalist pieces that we'll bring to you twice a month here on the show. So not every Wednesday, but 2 Wednesdays in every month at 7:30 is where we will be bringing you that content, but a little into the future, folks. Expect some of the stuff from about mid-June. But enough with the jibber jabber. How about we get straight into tonight's show? Before we do that, actually, a reminder, hit that like button if you're watching this simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter. Do yourself a big favor, hit that like button. If it is on YouTube, well, then subscribe to the channel. Help me grow my numbers. The goal is to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I believe we are at 42,700 at the moment. Help me with that. Hit the bell notification too whilst you're at it. A reminder, folks, we have a website. Please support the work that we do here on the show by going to the website at bigdaddyliberty.com. Now, with that being said, let me bring my guest on tonight. He is an investigative journalist, a award-winning journal from the Times Live stable. Now, here's a chap who is, I think, either starting his own podcast too, or has his own. I'll let him speak to that in a moment, but he is no stranger to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. For those of you who can jog your memories back, when we discussed the issue of the Zama illegal miners, who basically have taken over mining parts of South Africa, he was instrumental in helping us unpack that particular issue. I'm talking, of course, about Aron Hyman from the Times Live group. There he is on screen. Aron, brother, good evening.
Good evening, Sihle, and good evening to your viewers and listeners.
Brother, good to have you on the show, as always. I think it's very important for people to begin to get a stronger understanding of the things that are, effectively happening around them, and often, what's the English expression? Hidden in plain sight, I think will be a very good theme for tonight's show. As we look at the issue of these international crime syndicates, from hitmen to fraudsters, scammers, mob bosses, and indeed warlords, genocidal warlords who seem to have found South Africa to be a safe haven for them, even though they are top ranked on the INTERPOL list. Before we get into any of these examples, Aron, this is an area which you've covered in great detail over many stories. The picture that you're painting is a rather scary one.
Sihle, we've looked at, unfortunately, these things tend to come up on a almost bi-monthly basis at this stage. These individuals, organized crime individuals, we've had internationally wanted pedophiles being caught here facing extradition to the UK. We've had people who are linked to the Islamic State terrorist group here. We have people that are linked to the Israeli mafia here, to the British mafia, to the Bulgarian mafia, to the Nigerian mafia, and of course we have all of our own hoodlums who kind of work hand in glove with all these international folks. Recently, naturally, there's been this news about Fulgens Kayishema, who was arrested last week, and the Bulgarian national and his wife, who are very sort of professional execution. So yes, it's back on topic, I guess.
And I was about to say, we're going to get into some of those examples. Indeed, you mentioned the Rwandan chap, as he's, sorry, I'm just trying to remember his name here, Fulgens Kayishema, who was effectively busted in the battle of all places, quiet, sleepy farming town of Paarl. And here's this, alleged genocidal warlord, as a security guard in that part of the world. Let me just put that article on screen so that people get a sense of things. And by the way, for the viewers who are watching this, do yourself a favor, get a subscription to the Times Live group of papers. Absolutely fantastic journalistic work over there. And as I said, I'm going to put that on screen. Just bear with me here for a second as we work on the technology. With that being said, reminder to you, if you're watching and you've just joined us in conversation, looking at Interpol's top wanted individuals busted here in South Africa. Is South Africa becoming a refuge, we ask, for these international criminal groupings? Let me just put it on screen. There he is.
Okay. I've switched over to a different Wi-Fi network, so let's hope it holds.
No worries, no worries. There you go, the heading over there. Most wanted Rwandan genocide suspect arrested in the battle. As I mentioned, all of this is in the Times Live pieces. There is a rather charming image of the alleged killer over there, looking very happy. Nonetheless, Fulgence Kaishema, one of the world's most wanted genocide fugitives, has been arrested in Paarl in the Western Cape. Kaishema, of course, is alleged to have orchestrated the killing of about 2,000 Tutsi refugees, men, women, children, and the elderly at the Nyange Catholic Church during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. He had been at large since 2001. Aron, as I come to you here, I mean, here's a guy working as a security guard. Presumably, children, ordinary members of the public were passing every day by this guy, smiling and saying good morning to him.
Yeah, well, he's been here for at least 13 years. So in the community in Paarl, he definitely lived a very inconspicuous life. And from what I understand, well-loved and well-respected member of the community there. Yeah, so it's he worked as a security guard, as you say, at a wine farm. Also, once again, well regarded by the wine farm. He had the keys to the storerooms and everything, so he was very well trusted. But the double life he lived. He had multiple identities, actually. Allegedly defrauded Home Affairs with his two or maybe three of his fake identities. He had a South African identity under the first name Donatin. And then he also had another identity which he used to travel to Mozambique, it seems in 2015, if I recall correctly. And some of it looks like the first place or the first defrauding of Home Affairs was when he crossed from the then Swaziland, Eswatini, into South Africa. And yeah, this was like almost 2 decades ago now. So yeah, he's been here and well respected. Yeah.
Before I get into other examples, let's have this conversation, Aron, because at the thread that goes, sort of in between all of these stories is the fundamental breakdown of South African institutions meant to protect South African citizens, namely our border security, namely Home Affairs and immigration services, etc., etc. The corrupting of these services, a common thread.
Yeah, it's the crime. I always see it this way: the first crime that any of these guys, whether we're talking about the Israeli mafia, the Bulgarian mafia, the Nigerian mafia, the first crime all of them commit is defrauding Home Affairs when they first come here. It's almost always the case. And then they just live here, work the system. You and I go and stand in our queue to get our ID or to get our passport. They don't have to. They just pay 5,000 Rand or whatever.
Let's get into another example. You mentioned the Israelis. Now, this one's a bit close to home as a Jew, but nonetheless, and that's not to say Jews are criminals, folks. Here's a gang, an individual highly sought by Israeli authorities, found in Bryanston, Johannesburg, of all places, a gang leader, arrested with 7 others. Let me just put it up on screen. And before you provide any comment on this, Aron, I want to play a clip from your colleague where he basically just details the nature of the arrest and what happened on the day. But before I do any of that, let me just actually get it on screen. And as I'm doing that and struggling with that, a reminder, dear viewer, hit that like button, please. There it is, the headline. A story by Upatu Luvengo of the Times Group, Israel's most wanted gang leader, and 7 others arrested, 12 firearms seized, and a litany of other things. I'm going to go down to the section where I effectively highlighted, just to give some context. This, of course, is according to police spokesperson Ukono Alfenda Mate, who said that the Israeli had been on Interpol's red notice since 2015. He is a wanted suspect in Israel for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. According to authorities, the suspect is part of a notorious gang dealing in drug trafficking, extortion, and other criminal activities, and has been a suspect also for a bombing that happened in Israel on 2 separate occasions. As I mentioned, I want to play this very short clip from Aron Singh, who I believe is a colleague of yours, basically showing images of some of that arrest. Not some of that, but the arrest, pardon me, at the time. Just bear with me as I put this on screen. There it is.
Including 5 assault rifles, 7 pistols, $40,000 US, including 5 assault rifles, 7 pistols, $40,000 US, and
Oh no, we can't have that.
7 pistols, $40,000
Sorry, folks, just a bit of a technical glitch. I'm going to replay that. Just a bit too much glitching for my liking. Let's give it another chance.
Including 5 assault rifles, between 2003 and 2004, 7 pistols, $40,000 US, and 5 assault rifles, between 2003 and 2004, 7 pistols, $40,000 US, and
Okay, we're not doing that. Apologies for the technical glitches there, guys. That's what happens when you record something live like this. But I think the gist of it is actually quite clear there, Aron. A very dangerous gang operating in leafy suburbs, which is another almost thread by some of these stories. Again, these people operating in plain sight.
Yeah, well, this my colleague Graham Hoskin and I also wrote a story for the Sunday Times on this specific gang, and they appear to be operating. I mean, some of the organized crime individuals in South Africa appear to be operating for foreign intelligence services from the investigations that we've conducted, and this appears to be a gang which has technology, so that almost is on a it's the type of stuff that intelligence services would have access to. They had like counter surveillance technology, they had jamming technology, they had a little vehicle that they converted into basically an assassination truck where a sniper rifle could be fired from. And we believe that they may have been involved in at least one very, very high level hit that we covered, and which was also in the Johannesburg area. That was a very strange situation, the fact that this gang could have been in South Africa for so long. And there's a suspicion that there was police involvement in basically helping them to stay undetected here for so long.
I just unmute myself. I mean, the story you're painting here is a very scary one, because these individuals, as you said, are, heavily armed in most cases, possessing, in this particular case, the technology that you're mentioning. And really, it begs the question, why? Okay, and I'm going to be a little silly in asking a very obvious question. Why South Africa, and where is the police response? Here you're mentioning the potential even involvement of law enforcement officials in this particular case. Is this something you've seen in other cases, or generally is there also just a complete haplessness, if you will, by our law enforcement to the presence of these individuals?
So you often find that these individuals have been embedded in South Africa for quite a while. And naturally, with the deterioration of or the shutting down of certain organizations, the strategic withdrawing of resources from certain organizations. So, for instance, the Scorpions, which worked very well. They had their three structures. They were working very well with SSA when SSA was still working very well. They were working very well with the prosecutors. So it was this whole like complete package operation that they were affecting. I mean, if you take, for example, the work that they were doing on organized crime groups like the Bulgarians and things like that, even the Russian mob in South Africa, the Chinese triads, all of that sort of stuff. When the Scorpions was closed down, the Hawks was the product after that, which was a bit of an afterthought by the Zuma administration. I don't think they wanted anything near as effective as the Scorpions ever again in South Africa, because it's just too dangerous for politicians with sticky fingers. Basically, you have to have a lax law enforcement environment for this sort of thing to happen. Relatively good infrastructure, which is what these guys tend to go for. So you'll find, and then a good climate. Because they want to also be able to live in luxury, but good financial infrastructure and good internet infrastructure and good just infrastructure in general is key. It's almost like the ingredients that organized crime bosses and groups look for when they're looking for countries to operate from. And for some reason, South Africa kind of has all of those things. They can even hire private security to take care of all their needs, and increasingly hire private security as little private police forces to spy on people for them, to get information for them. So you've got the state being hollowed out by politicians and their nefarious sort of decision making, and then in the void you've got like this anarchy, the space of anarchy that's being filled by essentially what you should just see as warlords. It's like a feudal system where those with the most guns and the most money, tend to build the biggest castle and amass sort of the most power around them.
Speaking about these money operations, the last two examples are perhaps the most apt in that regard. The one, a Nigerian gang, I'll call them a gang just for the sake of brevity, the Black Axe Mafia, which was busted in Johannesburg. For those who remember 2 years ago, pardon me, you covered the story, Aron, and I'm going to put that on the screen. And the last story we'll cover, of course, is the Bulgarian chap who, I suppose he'll consider himself unfortunate for not being arrested, but rather being killed on the streets of Cape Town. Let me just get the Nigerian story up, and I want to read from it very briefly because I'll let you speak to it. The amount of money these individuals amass when they're here is staggering, especially when you consider also their criminal activities. There it is. INTERPOL arrests another alleged Black Axe member in Johannesburg, a much younger looking Aron there in the image. Let me just go down to the section. The arrest, of course, brought to 9 the members of the alleged Black Axe members arrested in South Africa that year. That was in 2021, on October 19. A huge police operation in Cape Town saw the arrest of 6 alleged leaders of the Black Axe, also called the Neo-Black Movement of Africa, according to the U.S. indictments. If memory serves me right, Aron, this one also involved the United States Secret Service because of the forging of the currency. Just talk to us about this one and the kind of money these people were making.
Still are making. They're making tons of there was it's a report brought out by the FBI every year, where they detail they basically take all of the research that they've done in the year on fraud, so internet fraud basically. And I think the report that they had in 2019 estimated that the romance scams and BEC fraud, which is the staple of what the Black Axe does, accounted for something like $6.3 billion in loss from the American economy. And that's just in America. So experts in the US that I spoke with said almost all BEC fraud cases and romance scam cases are conducted by the Black Axe and other West African organized crime groups. And so the Black Axe essentially, they're raking in billions of US dollars every year. And although the US is actually coming to South Africa to get these guys and extradite them to go and serve federal, jail sentences in a federal prison in the US, which is what these guys are so scared of. They are incredibly afraid of being extradited to the US. They'd rather sit in a prison in South Africa than go to the US. But their victims in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Botswana, in Zambia are countless. And our governments are doing nothing to protect victims here. And I mean, all around the world, governments are cracking down on the Black Axe. But in South Africa, it's they buying cars, luxury vehicles here, and there's overseas. Although I haven't seen necessarily the evidence of that at a large scale in South Africa, but I've had a lot of sources coming towards me, coming forward and saying that there's an intersection between drugs and the Black Axe, and we know that that's true in Italy, where there's drugs, murder, and prostitution and human trafficking, specifically from the southern states in Nigeria, where the Black Axe originates from. Human trafficking from there, where girls are being sold into prostitution in Paris, for example. And we suspect that the Black Axe are doing the same thing in South Africa. We just haven't found the links yet. But once again, our government couldn't be bothered in actually putting together a task team to follow up on that sort of crime and that level of interconnectedness.
You'll forgive me, Aron, for becoming incredibly angry and frustrated as I'm listening to this, because it seems as if these are insanely dangerous individuals who are operating effectively, by the sound of things, with impunity in this country, and a police force in this country led by another hapless individual, as we call him on this show. Actually, let me not say what we call him on this show, but it involves a hat and an ass, is what I'm saying, is what we call Ubhekicele, our police minister in this country. Here's the chap, Ubhekicele himself, safely ensconced behind a wall of bodyguards, millions of rands splurged on his safety. And you're describing a situation here, Aron, where some of the worst criminal elite minds, if you will, are operating in this country with this government doing almost nothing about it. And it gets brazen, Aron. This is where I want to link to our next story, where these people aren't just, sort of stealing and maybe an odd arrest here and there. These people are killing each other on our streets. I bring you now to the case of one Krasimir Kamenov. You'll forgive me for butchering the pronunciation of that, and I hardly care at this stage, given who this man was. And I use was because he was murdered in the leafy suburbs of, believe it or not, Constantia, Cape Town. That residents in that part of the world waking up to the murder of 4 individuals shot and killed execution style. Again, there's the article there. Wanted Bulgarian organized crime figure Krasimir Kamenov executed in Constantia home. Very briefly here, you mentioned how this individual was gunned down in his home in the upmarket leafy suburb, along with his wife, bodyguard, and nanny. The children, very concerningly, Aron, were at school at the time. This is the sort of carelessness, that these murders are happening. But there's something to be said about these murders because the hitmen were relatively professional.
Yeah, no, the hitmen were very professional. It was a execution, so it was the people were cuffed behind their backs, made to lay on the floor, and shot at point blank range with a silenced 9mm pistol. So it was, the hitmen knew exactly who their targets were. They knew exactly what they had to do, and they have gotten away for now. I really hope that the police managed to effect arrests. This guy was the head, Krasimir Kamenov, also known as Karo, was basically the head of the Bulgarian mob, an organization called VIS. And he is believed to be behind the bombing earlier this month, a car bomb which targeted the Supreme Prosecutor in Bulgaria. He was trying to organize allegedly trying to organize what you could probably call a sort of in a way like a
coup, maybe.
Yeah, like a riot. He paid I think 400,000 euros for a riot to start being incited. I mean, you can imagine July 7 all over again, but just in Bulgaria, to effect some sort of change with the prosecutor general in that country. So the people in charge of prosecuting organized crime, with certain politicians trying to lean the government toward a more pro-Russia thing, because I mean there was allegedly embezzlement with the Russian bank and all sorts of things. So yeah, but this guy, I mean, he was placed on an Interpol red notice list. I interviewed him last year. He was in my podcast. Everybody knew where he was in South Africa. His wife was also in my pod. Well, I also spoke with her. So anybody who had wanted to find him could have easily gone and arrested him. So here's the head of the mob of another country. By all accounts, a very, very dangerous person who is a danger to our state security and to the safety of people in South Africa. And he's just living, scot-free in the leafy suburbs of Constantia. The police could have gone and arrested him. They didn't. And yeah, just to get back to the comment that you made about Minister Trele, this is the point behind all of this is that you've got a police service which is being micromanaged by a politician, where that should never ever be the case. If you want to have a professional police service, cadre deployment at the very top structures of the police is rife. We strongly suspect there's enough evidence to strongly suspect that the ANC's cadre deployment committee was making recommendations on which police officers should be deployed in general positions. These are operational positions made for career police officers. I mean, the fact that Bheki Cele himself was taken from a local government position, when was it, in 2009, from an MEC position and made a police commissioner with a rank in the police is scandalous. It still is scandalous. South Africans should never forget that is what we sit with when we're talking about a police service which is failing to fulfill its duty in South Africa, and where police officers are routinely burnt out, where they are being worked to the bone because you get micromanagement from the very top to serve very narrow political goals.
That's right. And again, it becomes very scary when one realizes the effect of that. And we often talk about it a lot, Aron, in the last 5 minutes of the show. Let's just unpack this. We often talk about this a lot on the show, that, it is that dangerous confluence of the political ineptness of the top individual, in this particular case, the minister, then under him, police management structure, which is filled with deployed cadres of the ANC. again, just to support your assertion, because you're absolutely right, one need only go back and look at other police commissioners who've been appointed in this country to realize that it's been very few instances when we've had an actual career cop as the top cop in this country. At one stage, we had a social worker, for God's sake, as the head of the police, Uriah Pierre, for those who've forgotten, or as we call her in Zulu, Umamfundisi, the preacher's wife. Personal joke, but understood by most Zulu-speaking people. But to be more serious on this issue, it's this. Sorry, I'm caught by my own sentence construction. Let me take a step back. It's this situation of the political interference, the appointing of people who don't know what they're doing in these key structures of the South African Police Service, that then lends itself to situations like these, where, for instance, the Bulgarian embassy this week, obviously speaking to one of your rivals, indicated that actually we've told the South African government since 2008 that this chap is in the country, and they simply, that is the police, didn't act on this information. Often, Aron, these high-profile criminals are known to be in the country, but our SAPS is simply inept. It places yours and my lives in danger.
I think just to take one more jab at our esteemed minister.
No, please do.
You know, the EFF case with rather not the EFF case, but the the Secretary General's daughter who...
Yes, his murder, or the murder of his daughter, pardon me. So in
the Gadi murder, prime example, where now these individuals are being exonerated by the court, and they would have every reason to sue the state. But once again, there you've got an overeager police minister getting involved, pushing a political agenda, all of that sort of stuff, where that should never be the case. You should never have somebody like that who can play with people's lives the way that he does, with his dangerous rhetoric. It never helps. It doesn't help the police officers to do their jobs. In fact, it impedes them from doing their jobs, because they now have the understanding that there's this political Damocles sword hanging over their necks, that if they don't perform and do what the minister wants from them, it could be their jobs. Promotion is coming up. You're not going to get your promotion. You better perform. You better maybe concoct a statement if you need to. But sorry, what was your question?
No, let's stay here for 10 seconds, because I want to put numbers to exactly what you're talking about. Or of a police minister who's elevated himself to being this PR rock star of what should be a very serious core function of the state, namely law enforcement. Let's put some numbers to this. We covered this on the Vuga Nazo morning show, sorry, I've now changed the name, where 82.5 million rand, or over 80 million rand, pardon me, excuse me, let me take a step back. I got a little too excited there. 8.2 million rand has been effectively spent on flying around the country to do exactly what you're talking about, rocking up at crime scenes to be the rock star and to perform in front of cameras, holding these press conferences, and often, as you now mentioned, interfering in the actual investigative work in a destructive type way, which brings me back to that question that I then posed, that, all of this nonsense hides the fact that these massive criminals, these international criminals, are pulling off very violent crimes on the one hand, and also very sophisticated mega crimes around drugs, for example. Coming back to this Bulgarian chap, is he not the chap who was linked to that massive cocaine bust that happened in the Saldana area? And he's also linked to bombings and the like. Where were the police in all of this?
Well, I suspected when I interviewed him, I suspected that there was a link, but I can't prove the link. But I know he's part of a Bulgarian organized crime network in Cape Town in South Africa, larger South Africa, which is linked to that individual who was arrested for that cocaine bust. So it's not, I can't draw the direct link between him and that cocaine bust. But I know that he's linked to that organization, that grouping. But that's exactly the point, where you've got those people know that nobody is working on them. Nobody is on their case. They don't really have to lie low, because they look at the same antics that we see with the police minister, and they know it's perfect. They're going to be untouched because they know what's happening in organized crime in South Africa, and they know that this minister is nowhere near understanding what it takes to crack down on that. And as long as he's diverting police resources to all sorts of other things and wasting time and money, they won't be caught.
And unfortunately, that might be where we have to leave it, Aron. And that last statement of yours is chilling when one looks at the crime stats that were just released, a couple of days ago, where all categories of violent crime, effectively, and more concerningly, crime against children, is up in this country. Aron, as always, you get final word, final thoughts on this issue and what people need to be looking out for in terms of stories that you may be covering, and a certain podcast that I think you've launched, but I'll let you speak to that.
Just before I do that, Hillary Gardy, let's not forget her name, because she obviously was the victim of that murder that we referred to earlier. But yes, the podcast was a podcast that I did in December. It was just a once-off 4-part podcast about Bulgarian organized crime, cocaine trafficking in South Africa. So it's called Cape of Cocaine. If you want to hear basically the last interview that anyone had with the head of the Bulgarian mob, it's in that podcast. And please support journalism and hold us accountable, but also please help us by paying for subscriptions and buying our newspapers and just reading our stories.
Absolutely. That is Aron Hyman, of course, award-winning journalist, investigative journalist for the Times Group. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Aron, there. And he's absolutely right, guys. Please support their work. I will put a link in the description of the video to that particular podcast that Aron is speaking about, the Cape of Cocaine. I'll make sure that it's up on the link. Guys, thank you so much for watching, as we've just run slightly over time, but that's okay. As always, it's a great time to have Aron and his friends at the Times Live Group breaking it down for us. What do you think? Let me know. Give me your comments in the comment section. Are you someone who's maybe watching some of this criminality in your area, wondering where are the police? Where are SAPs? We've really dug into the ribs of Ubehitene on the show, but that's we're no strangers to doing that on this show. As I said, we like to call him the ass hat on the show for a good reason. This man is literally, let me end it there. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Drop a comment, of course. Leave a like if you're watching on any of the platforms at the moment. And a reminder that we've got a website. Find us, please, at bigdaddyliberty.com. With that being said, thanks for watching. And as I like to say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.